Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I think we're having a great time already. I can see a lot of questions coming up. The last point that I caught on to was when the lady asked that question, and the answer that came first was we're living in an uncertain world, a VUCA environment. What's happening today might not be relevant tomorrow, right? And that's exactly what this panel discussion will try to shed some light on. While we're living in an uncertain world, what are those skills that you need to build in your people? And I think one skill that really pops up here is the skill of resilience. How equipped are your people ready to bounce back when they're facing adversities at work? Developing those kind of skills is going to be very, very important. So especially with the rapid advancement of technology, shifting market dynamics, unpredictable disruptions, it is imperative to cultivate a culture of continuous learning and skilling to foster resilience. So without any further ado, I'd like to, first of all, thank my fellow panelists for joining me here. And the first question that I have, and it's a very interesting and relevant question for today, how can organizations align learning and skilling initiatives with the evolving needs of the organization to build a more resilient workforce who's able to adapt to the changing world outside? So I'd love to go to the ladies first, if the gents are okay with it. So Dimple, I'd love to hear your thoughts first.
Thank you, and thank you for having us here today. It's really a privilege to be invited by ETHR at such an esteemed event. I think strategy is something that all organizations are continuing to shrink, as one would call it, because strategy is changing almost every 2 years, and hence the needs of the organization and the workforce are also equally changing fairly frequently. It's about keeping a track on those needs and making sure that you are adjusting against those needs for your workforce. It's continuously looking at what are the requirements of the workforce today, whether it's by generation, whether it's by the diversity, whether it's by the need of the strategic intent of the organization as well. All these are aspects that need to be looked at to build a very strong organization, and the strength will build the ultimate resilience for the long term of that organization.
Thanks, Dimple. A good thought to start this. I think, Shruti, what would you like to add to that?
Absolutely. Thank you, Dimple, for putting that start note. But, we all know that the environment today is drastically shifting and becoming uncertain and difficult to predict. And especially with the advancements in AI, machine learning, and other cognitive technologies, the shelf life of the skills of the past has shrunk, and it has been reduced to 1 year, 2 years, or a max of 3 years, 4 years. But what we have to also realize that with these changes, there would be a change in the expectation of how you want to align yourself with respect to the changes in the market as well, right? So realizing that with the changes in these cognitive technologies bringing in, you have to also ensure that instead of focusing on learning needs, which are very specific to skill, you have to make your people more rounded and focusing on problems like not just a skill, but problem solving, solutioning. And for this, the approach has to be in a manner wherein you gear up for change and gear up for what stands ahead of the time and wanting yourself to get to that point.
Great point. Thanks so much. I think as we hear from the both of you, the way the businesses are also changing, it's way different from how it used to happen a decade ago, maybe. Businesses change on a daily basis today, and then that's where the learning initiatives, your upskilling, your reskilling initiatives need to align so that people are at par with the way our market and our business is changing. So great thoughts there. Atul, I'd love to hear from you also. How do you think can we align those needs of the organization while there's so much of disruption happening, and how do you bring up your people to that level?
So I think, Yasmin, what I heard from our fellow panelist is, of course, it is very important that alignment with the business, how the business is heading towards which direction, and how our skill sets is also scaling up or matching up to that scale is very important. But also I think the most important piece, what I have seen, and it is, I think many of us might have also observed, is that what stage at which the organization is, and what industry the organization is also very, very important. Other than that, these are all internal factors. An external factor is, of course, the world is disrupting, right? The whole skills are there. So both sides we have to match in terms of, catching up with what kind of skill sets are. One is that which industry you are getting into, what diversification you are doing in your business. Hence, different skills are required. So it is very, very important. I think the punchline is what took us here won't let you there. It is very, very important. And that's how we have to keep on upskilling or reskilling ourselves. Is very, very important. That's where I think the alignment happens automatically. Otherwise, it's very clear that you will be redundant or irrelevant for whatever role you are playing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the statement about what got you here will not get you there says it all. That's where resilience comes into place. When things will not go the way you planned, how do you people bounce back from that? Vinay, your thoughts, please.
Well, resilience, one fundamental aspect of resilience is the ability to adapt and change in an agile manner, right? So, and I think one fundamental disruptive change that is actually happening as we speak is the shift from being a role-based or job-based organization to being a skill-based organization. And there is data that is actually supporting all of this. A recent McKinsey study actually demonstrated that if you hire for skills instead of hiring for degrees, you have 5 times more predictive ability of that individual performing on the job, right? And the same applies to, it's actually twice as much more predictive as compared to hiring for only work experience. So that's just on the hiring front. Actually, there are 2 more aspects of it when we are talking about building a resilient organization, a skills-based organization. It's how you're developing your people. So how is your learning and development strategy really looking at it? How is your learning culture in the organization evolving? So are you actually skills-driven? And because it's, at the end of the day, jobs are changing so fast, it's actually a congregation of multiple skills. It's no longer, as Shruti also says, it's just one single skill area, but it's a combination of multiple skills with the fundamental skill of learnability, which is really driving it. So I think as many employees have learnability as a skill, which is essentially what? It's about learn, unlearn, and relearn, right? The ability to do that at pace. And the third part is, of course, most organizations are facing this challenge of talent mobility. Again, if that is skills-based, if your employees are aware of what are the skills that are in demand currently and what are coming up in demand over the next 1 or 2 years, they will be better prepared in terms of acquiring those skills, and that will also promote continuous learning that we talk about. I think I've mentioned a lot of these terms here, and maybe as we go along, can elaborate on those.
Yeah, I think I'd love to come back to the whole culture of continuous learning, and I think that's one thing I'd like to ask our panelists. But before that, you said that now the idea is here to hire for skills, train for skills, rather than look for job roles or job profiles, right? So there comes the whole point of how do you identify those skills, and especially when you're looking at skills like resilience, which I don't think are really easy to find. So Dimple, I'd like to ask you, how do you kind of identify what kind of critical skills are needed for building resilience, and how do you create a system which kind of, one, identifies the gap, and second, tries to bridge that gap?
Thank you again. I think, let's try and understand what resilience is, right? What is really resilience? When we talk about resilience, we talk about stability in many ways, right? We talk about, as you look at stock markets, for example, if you're looking for investing in a company, you look for stable organizations that you'd want to invest in. You'd look to invest in your careers with stable organizations that are growing or providing for sustainable growth for your careers as well as themselves. So there is an element of stability that we're trying to seek when we're thinking of resilience. But what one does not understand is that stability is not a single mindset as such itself. And hence organizations that are looking to become more stable and resilient then needs to look at those dark spaces or blind spots for themselves, which in effect means exactly what Vinay sort of said, is that go into those spaces of new opportunities where you've not gone before, go into uncharted territories, go into new ways and new methodologies, new technologies, new ideas and new innovations to really build for the better future for yourself, so that you self-cannibalize in many ways, so that you're able to lead from the front. As in, there's an example of an organization called Victorinox. I don't know if many of you have heard of it. Victorinox is popularly known as a company that made Swiss knives. They suddenly once went down and plummeted in their sales post-September 11. when no one was allowed to carry knives in their luggage on the planes post the incident. And they went out and created a phenomenon which was their philosophy that when good times happen, you save, and when bad times happen, you come out of those bad times as well. So good times don't last long, and bad times also don't last long. Now, what this story tells us is that in their bad times, they were invested back in their people. They went from selling Swiss knives to selling Victorinox watches. They invested in clothing as a place to build their next brand, and they really used their people to do that. So they invested back in their people to help build to the organization that they had to. And what that again tells us is that they had people who were looking to come up with realistic plans. They had people who were having that agile mindset to go into anything. They had people who were going with a win-win situation for an atrocity that they were all going through. And they had people that they were trying to figure out how to come together as a collective and collaborate more and more. Right? So those are the skills that we're really looking for today in an organization. And just to answer your question around, how do you create methodologies today in capturing skills? There is a good news and a bad news around it. Let's start with the bad news. The bad news is that we're all in it together. We have skill gaps, and we know that we have skill gaps. And the good news is that we are all in it together as well, right? We're trying to learn from each other, and we're trying to get to a place where we can be better, and we can share those learnings with each other, and these forums are sort of part of that. What we have to understand, and going back a few years ago, we had the World Economic Forum reports that came out on the future of work and the future of job, etc., and they since then have been publishing it every year. If you go on the World Economic Forum website today, they'll tell you that 49% of the workforce today that is getting educated from the formal sector, only 49% people get a proper job, right? So which tells you that 51% are still not getting a job, and they're relying on building skills outside of the formal education sector to get to proper jobs. And that's exactly what the problem most organizations are facing with today, that we need people who are educated on so many frontiers, are able to deliver to so many challenges and problems. And we were jokingly talking about colors of a spectrum, and the erstwhile persona of an employee was different colors of a spectrum. You had a blue, which was a finance guy, you had a green that was an HR guy, you had a pink that was a transformation and a technology guy. Today, the persona that we're all looking for is a gradient person. We're looking for someone who is a combination of all of these things, who's able to deliver so many things as one person. It is difficult. Going back to 20 years ago, it was not, the jobs are much more easy. You need to apply more brain, you need to invest more time in yourself, you need to understand where you need to go from where you stand today, and hence continue to invest that more and more. So organizations, to start with, they need to look at building skill taxonomies, where you stand in your skill infrastructure, what are the current gaps in your skills, and then how do you build for those skills so that you can create targeted talent and learning interventions that can build to bridge the gap associated with those. And there are market practices such as the Economic Forum reports and industry insights that can absolutely help. But you also need the tone from the top, the leaders' advocacy, and desire and ambition from the average employee to really invest in themselves to be the gradient person eventually as well. So it is a hard subject, but we're all grappling with it, and we are all sort of learning through it as well.
Great points. Thanks, Dimple. I think the fact that you said that change is evident, inevitable, in fact, and how agile are your people to adapt to the way the business is changing, and you gave a great example. So you don't want people who fit into one box anymore, right? You want people who can do multiple things, multiple skills at the same time, and that's how people are also ready to invest in themselves. It's no longer that one-size-fits-all approach, so I think that's how the future of work will also look like. So thanks for sharing. Anybody from the panel would like to add to that? I'm happy to hear about how can you identify those critical skills, how can you build learning outcomes aligned to them? Yes, Shruti.
I'll just add to this, similar to what Dimple said, especially at Nagarro, I can give you an example. When we started looking at our learning approaches and the way we want to rethink about what we are doing, what has been working for us, what has not been working, or with the changes, how do we want to align ourselves? we looked at, and we use this term internally, which we call learn agility, building a culture of learn agility within the organization, which is learning with an agile mindset, geared up for fast-paced change. And we've been earlier focusing on building T-shaped personalities or skill personalities for our people, which would mean in-depth knowledge in a particular area complemented by domain knowledge. But we took it up a notch above and said, why not invest in our folks and help them build bridge-shaped personalities with multiple, deeper knowledge sets in various areas, complemented by horizontal knowledge like complementing pillars of the bridge, which would help them become future ready, especially in these times of change. So just to add to that.
Thanks. Yes, Vijay.
Can I just add a perspective to that? Shruti mentioned T-shaped. So one aspect about also ensuring that there is agility in terms of taking up an alternate role within the organization. We're talking about talent mobility there. A lot of organizations today are focusing on identifying what are those adjacent skills that any individual can really acquire in depth, which would make them more mobile within the organization as such and not become siloed in only one specialization area and hence have the risk of running into a job redundancy or a role redundancy as such. So there is this concept which is emerging. This comes from a gentleman, a Dutch gentleman, his name is Jeroen Kruijnbrink. He's written this book called The 1 Minute Strategy. I would urge all of you to see if you haven't read it yet. He talks about a V-shaped employee. Slight deviation from the T-shape there, right? So what happens is the T-shape, the broader part is where you're getting only surface level skills or knowledge as such and only one deep skill. So the recommendation is that every employee should aspire to have deep skill in at least one more skill area, right? And yes, the broader part would still remain, but the V-shape will make them more agile in terms of being able to fit into any alternate role as such. That's something which is really evolving. And a lot of skill development is actually moving into that direction, moving away from the traditional way of saying, oh, look, curation is a massive challenge. If you try to curate your learning paths and all of that, it's not a one is done kind of thing now anymore, right? Oh, I did this last year, so we are all set for the next 5 years. Well, you created it, and maybe within months it all became redundant, right? So that's where AI started helping us in curation. But I think how you're actually tailoring your entire learning initiative and your learning infrastructure, your ecosystem, based on this philosophy is something which would really help there.
Yeah, I think that's where the whole concept of hyper-personalization, customization of learning programs also has become very, very important if you want to get into those kind of skills.
Don't get me started, I have a very solid...
I know. But another interesting point here is, I think most of the organizations are hybrid today, right? And we all understand the challenges that come along with having a hybrid workforce. So Shruti, I'd like to hear from you. How can organizations ensure equitable access to learning and skilling? Because you have people in different places, different levels. How can people manage that?
So I think post-pandemic, the world changed for everybody, and especially for us as well. We went work from anywhere, not just work from home, but we are operating out of 32 countries, colleagues in India spread out in more than 600 cities, and so on and so forth, yeah. So, in this era of employee experience revolution, I would say, employee experience being one prime goal every HR would seek for and look at. These are things which also make you a differentiator with your competitors, right? In this era, what I think organizations will have to give a lot of freedom to people in terms of flexibility and freedom for them to be curating their own learning paths. At the same time, investing in tools that will help them creating their own learning libraries, own learning paths with respect to their aspirations and with respect to their current job roles. But the aspiration part is really important. See, we've been talking about importance of learning for the organization. It's as much as important for the employees. Employees these days, especially millennials as well, they would want, and they would want for an organization to think about their own personal growth as well. So you have to factor that in your plans. So if we were to look at, I'll give you an example of how we do at Nagarro. In Nagarro, our learning module has 3 fundamental pillars. One, your domain or project-specific learning, which is a must for you because you have to carry a particular set of skills or a job for the organization. The other one is where we created a whole library of general topics of interest. Now, these topics could vary from what you like, from what I like, or what Dimple may like to do. But this gives the flexibility to employees to choose while tooling up the right amount of tech stack where they could use it in an efficient manner. And for us, what helped is we went away with the mandates for people on prescribed learning, but made it voluntarily by choice. The third part of this pillar is experiential learning, learning from experience of others, community learning. This is a deal breaker for us. We recently launched our a scale or a program which encompasses all of these learnings, and we called it LSD. LSD, of course, not LSD that comes to your mind, but of course it's learn, socialize, and disrupt. Gamify, make learning fun. And in LSD series, one of the main series that we picked up is learning through experience of leaders within the organization. So our CEO is dedicating time to every week,
Absolutely.
an hour to talk about thinking breakthrough models, how to think about a particular problem, solving it. And he's getting industry experts and getting people from who are entrepreneurs from whom you can learn, tapping into the knowledge base of your peers, of community around. This will give you an edge because learning a particular skill, you have n number of courses available, freelance, and of course, I'm sure most of the organizations also do catalog learnings in terms of skills. But focus on how to make your people future ready, right? But tooling it up, because in hybrid workplaces, in-room coaching and such measures and methods of the past might not work. So try and build avenues through which you are engaging the entire organization, so your goal of engagement is also attained. But at the same time, these guys learn from each other, driven through a very strong focus from senior leadership as
Absolutely.
well. That's where the focus also comes in.
Sure. Thanks, Shruti. I think that makes a lot of sense, that you have to democratize learning, help people learn where they are, how they want to, what's more contextual to them. If you can, I know it's very tough, and Vinay would agree with that because he works with multiple organizations where you need to create those kind of programs which reaching them there where they are and helping them learn and upskill themselves the way they want to. But that brings me to another very important question, and Atul, I'd love to hear from you there. The mindset to upskill and reskill is still missing to a large extent in organizations. At times, as our panelists also said, it has to be prescribed. How can you move from that? How can you create a mindset where people are ready to upskill and reskill on their own?
So I think this is one problem which I have been facing, and I'm trying to find a hack. And I'm sure many of us would be exploring what is the best option available. But what I have seen is typically, I was talking just outside this room, is that health and learning, these are two things which prescription works very less. I mean, it's more if it is coming from within, right? And from that perspective, I think what we have tried to do differently is, I think one of the important skills, since we are talking about skills, one of the important skills is, out of the skills is will, which is very, very important, right? That is what I think if we, at the time of hiring or at the time of looking at person to give a new role, is something which we are putting large emphasis in terms of, and we are doing a lot of investment in terms of how we can identify people. So there are some assessments which we do at the time of, it's not just that we identify, okay, the world is moving there, this is a hot skill and this is where we are heading towards, everybody go under the training and then somebody will acquire, whosoever will pass or fail, and then they will pick up those roles. So what we have done is we have done it, tried to done it scientifically in terms of understanding the personality of a person. That is very, very important. What is the willingness of that person towards the learning approach? And how person is going to take the learning, in what manner. It is not something what Shruti was saying, that it is not something which is blanket one module which will be there. It has to be personalized,
Yeah.
depending on the personality of an individual. That is one piece. Second, also, when we look at it, we have linked it with the performance. And it's not a performance means, okay, basis learning, you will get promotion or you will get this thing. Of course, there are some levers which are there, but the important piece is there are two parts of the performance management which we have put in place. One is the performance management, performance-based skills, which are required to attain, and there are scales which we have defined. In the scale of 1:5, we call it, we have taken it from G, which is bicep model, and that's where we map every individual. That, okay, for this role which you are playing, these are the performance skills which are required, and you are at skill level 5 or level 2 or level 3.
Yeah.
And what is the gap? And hence, what is the way you can attain those skills? The second important piece is the potential, which we evaluate during the performance. And potential specifically revolves around the future roles which person is going to take. And future roles comprises of course, we as an organization, by virtue of which business, which new thing we are trying to get into, also what the outside market is demanding.
Yeah.
Basis that we are making ready. So as an organization, I think, Yasmin, we definitely try that our emphasis is, like we call it, right? If you take care of your employees, they will take care of your customers. And hence, people first should be the approach. Same way, we think that if we make our people, invest on people in terms of making them future ready, in terms of their skill sets, organization automatically will become future ready. And that is where the whole emphasis is that, so this is where we focus more on the people side, the personality side, and then we try to reward. Of course, there are then different things. We give forum for people to go to different conferences or to some certain forums wherein they can represent. That is I think, incentive which we give it to people. And that's where everybody is like media hungry or their social media is, that's why it is so famous, right? So that's where I think we are trying to do that. And it is somewhere changing the mindset.
Yeah.
And otherwise it is like you got the grass in front of the horse, but horse will not eat what you'll do. That's where typically the struggle was there always in terms of the learning.
Got it.
And hence this approach is what is typically working for us so far.
Yeah, I think it's about aligning the aspirations of your people with the aspirations of the organization, right? Yes, Vinay, please.
Just a quick rejoinder to that. I think a bit of a controversial statement here, but I think the mindset is not there. The mindset is here amongst us, right? And just to give you an example, there was this entire piece about saying, oh, you know what, a certain generation will never take to technology. They will always find it difficult. Oh, they have never been exposed to it. Only the millennials are the digital natives. But today, if you really look at it, in your day-to-day lives, everybody, irrespective of age, they have adopted to technology so well, right? Everyone is using their smartphone, various apps, they're on social media, they're on Insta, everything. So why shouldn't be the same happening with learning as well, right? So I think when we talk about mindset, it's also about the fact that are you really giving that individual a choice, right? To learn the way they would prefer to learn, rather than telling them, oh, you know what, if you have to acquire this skill, you have to go through this 20-week learning program, right? Well, yes, you will face resistance. So how are you actually creating more choices? The other part is also about saying, we talk about DEI, BEDI, and all of that, right? I think we also need to look at DEI in learning. So how inclusive is your learning culture, your learning ecosystem that actually creates opportunities for people to learn? It's not that they don't want to learn. I think it's also, so for example, language is classic. And I constantly, that's my favorite phrase is that the language of business is English, but the language of learning need not be, right? So if there is a large portion of your organization, and we see this in a lot of companies who are called the so-called non-tech sector, right? Where people are just not getting included because they don't get to learn in their language of preference. So I think it's more of that. How are we actually creating those more opportunities, ability to learn the way they would want? Also about saying, why should I actually have to go through the same learning path and the same course that everybody else has to go through? Maybe my proficiency level is different right now. Can I get a shorter learning path? Because at the end of the day, it is more about meeting the objective and not just going through the learning, right? So those are aspects. even now, when we talk to people, people talk about completion. This person has not completed a course. Does it really matter? Because this person has acquired the skill that was required. The person has got the experience and has done this work earlier. It's just the add-on that the person is requiring to do the job better. If that, what do you want the person to do? Do the job better, right? Not earn a degree. So those are aspects when we talk about mindset that we have to look at.
Yeah.
Just to add
Yes,
to, or append to what we just heard, right? At HSBC, we follow what you would call a push and pull approach. So the push approach is really, and we look at learning through two lenses, and I've got my learning team here who can talk more about it. But one is, and it's truly hybrid, and so we're trying to go with the times as much as possible. But the two approaches are for behavioral learning and then for technical learning. When we talk about the push approach, we've defined at a group level what are the 9 behavioral skills that we need from our employees. And we've sort of planted in it what we call the future fit learning landscape. And then we have trainings, much like what you heard from my colleague here in terms of entrepreneurial skills, agility, innovation, curiosity, and stuff like that. Learning from entrepreneurs, learning from people who've actually executed these skills in the marketplace, and bringing that outside in perspective is basically the behavior that we want to change. And there's a bit of a push because we're trying to prescribe to employees as much as possible against what you probably said, that there is an element of prescription that we are putting because our employees are also blindsided sometimes of what may be there in the future that they should invest their time in. The second thing that we are doing is technical capabilities. To my point earlier that, skill taxonomies are really important. Building those skill taxonomies that are relevant for the average Joe on the ground and then putting them on career pathways and then telling them that these are the skills that you need. These are the skills that we are hiring for. These are emerging skills and these are declining skills and so on and so forth, that you should invest in these skills, etc. The third thing, which is sort of a pull and not a push, is we're experimenting in that space, which is called, we've invested in a technology called Gloat. I can talk about it openly, which is basically a talent marketplace where we have asked our colleagues and leaders to advocate learning by experiential learning, right? So put projects, get employees to get on projects, follow the concept of what we call, you could call it Google time or, the 80-20 or 90-10 principle of learning. Spend 80% of your time on your productive day, whatever it is that you do, and then 20% go find whatever it is that you want to do. And that is, like I said, is an experiment because we also need to get the colleagues to find the time to do it in their day job over and above, and also our managers and leaders to acknowledge the fact that they need to be able to find time to give to the colleague to do what they want to do beyond their day job. So, it's sort of a hybrid in many ways in helping change the mindset to your question.
Yeah. Great point. Unfortunately, time is up, and I wanted to take some audience questions. Is there anything, I can already see lots of, can we make it like really quick so that we can, anybody to pass on the mics, please, yeah. I'll request you to keep the question very brief so that we can just, because we barely have time.
Thank you so much. My name is Geet. I'm right here from Gurgaon. So I just wanted to check, in all of your vast experiences, what is this one thing that an HR lead or a training lead needs to do so that this culture of continuous learning keeps on going? And how does it converts people into their ambassadors? So that's, I wanted to know. I would actually tap into your vast experiences, and that's my question. Thank you.
Who'd like to take it up? Anybody? I think we were talking about the role of leaders, champions, ambassadors already. Anybody would like to answer?
I can go, Atul, if you're okay. So, like we said, right, learning has to be as part of your BAU. We are trying to experiment at HSBC, at least, in terms of the push and pull strategy of learning, where we're trying to push our colleagues to learn certain things that we think will help and benefit them in their career, in the long-term outcomes to the organization, and build on the ROI for themselves, as well as the ROI for the organization. And in that, what we're really asking our colleagues is to be part of that journey as much as possible. We have leaders who are championing these learning journeys or learning capabilities and skills that we think are relevant for our future and equally for our employees' future. And really enticing them is what the idea is, right? How do you entice them so that the pull from them automatically comes? Because to the point that Atul made earlier, that there is also the will of the employee that needs to come into this. And what I said earlier, that there is the gradient persona that we're always going to be looking for eventually. So how do you make sure that you have the vast talent that you have within the organization? How do they get from where they stand today to where we want them to be? And how do we bring them on that journey? And sort of this has become a social cause as well, beyond the organizational frame that we're all sitting in, because it's more about the environment, the ecosystem for all of us to become better workers over a period of time till the time we want to work in corporate jobs and continue to find the perfection in skills that we are gaining. So it's basically supporting that cause in many ways.
Thanks, Dimple. Yeah, you wanted to say something?
I just, what, I mean, we spoke about this person, sorry, my bad. This overall, what is the leader, what HR function should do, IT, and what you have mentioned very recently, that here, the important piece is that how you are actually taking the buy-in and involving the business leaders, the internal champions, is the biggest game for HR function, or typically the learning and development team, will make it success or fail. And what we have done is just an example that we have created a trainers club. And we have tried to the extent possible that internal learning, internal trainers who are there, who are actually business owners, if they can become champions and train or impart the training. And it is not in typical instructor-led training or a classroom training. It's what Shruti was saying, that it is a community learning, right? Yeah. Experiential learning. We have enforced as a mandate to CEO as well that he is definitely once in a month spending at least 1.5 hours, training hours, for impart any experience, be it new vision, what he's thinking, how things are happening in the market, where we are. But sharing those experiences itself is a huge thing, and people are looking forward for it. Sure. That makes a big success. We celebrate on 5th September as a Trainers Day, which is a Teachers Day, and there we facilitate top trainers. Also, how you're driving the culture of learning is that you publish that these are the top trainers. So many hours they have spent on training, other than their routine work. That itself pushes a lot of things for a lot of people to become trainers, and also a lot of people to also join and hear from the respective people whom they are working day in, day out, rather than getting gyan from outside. And that's where it drives a lot of things, and it ultimately leads to success to the whole learning team.
Absolutely. It's creating those champions, creating that culture, finding out what motivates them, what's the will to skill. I think finding that out is very important. Maybe one more question, if you can take. I could see some hands here, this side. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Ma'am? Okay,
Yes, sorry.
Can I ask?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So, ma'am, as we are talking continuously about learning and upskilling, so I myself, I am having 7 years of experience as a HR professional, but I'm very new to learning and development. So only 1 year experience in learning and development. So what basic core skill set I should be having as a L&D professional so that I can actually fulfill the skill gap of my company? So,
Anyone would like to take that up? Vinay.
Just learn to understand the business of your company.
Absolutely.
Keep
That's-
your eyes,
that's
ears
absolutely
open,
fundamental.
how the market is reacting,
Yeah.
what your employees need, where your organization needs are aligned, which direction the organization is heading in terms of skilling needs. I think those things will help you. And for your own skill, I don't think there is a very different skill set that you require to be able to perform this role, but with your time in the role and understanding of the entire landscape of it is what will help you sail through it, yeah?
okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I think great learning professionals are those that really understand the commercial business context.
Yes.
And are able to play back. So we're talking about skills, right? Skills are really to drive the business forward wherever the business wants to go. So great learning professionals will be those that are really able to understand and contextualize and then customize solutions that may be relevant for the business. So keep looking at those nuggets.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, try to understand what are the skill requirements, learning requirements from the business side.
Okay.
And then that's how you match up as an L&D professional, if I'm right. So that's one final question, and I think we'll wrap this up. I think, ma'am, you wanted to ask something. Can you pass the mic on, please? And for everyone else, I'm sorry if I can't see much of you here properly, but if we miss you out, you can catch our speakers outside after this. Yes.
Hi, I'm Himani here from Etude 360. So because this was about resilience, and resilience is something which I feel cannot be taught, but it's more about building it. And it gets built when you face setbacks and failures. So in an organization, how do we create that safe space where they get to experience these setbacks and failures without having a large impact on results, relationships, or resources. So do we have a way to provide a safe space for experimentation where they actually experience these setbacks?
Yes.
Yeah, so I think for the similar thing, and this leads to a lot of, because when you are in a very dynamic, this thing, innovation is something which leads to all these skill sets and space which we need to create it. And we have created, similar to Shark Tank, we have created Spark Tank, for example, in our this thing. And the most important thing is when we do our quarterly rewards, we have very clearly also mentioned that let us not just celebrate the success, but the failures. The effort, the intent is also needs to be celebrated or rewarded. And that's where I think these are one or two things which we have tried to do, and it has really helped. People have come up, they have got budgets for whatever innovative ideas are there. And Spark Tank was so popular in this thing that we got 137 entries with innovative ideas, that we can do so many things. And then of course the filtration happened, but everybody was excited. And even though out of top 3, we celebrated all 137 entries which have come. These were all great ideas, and people were motivated. And that really gives a great boost, that you're driving that culture, and that defines, right, that you let people fail. There is no your constraints or watertight compartments as such. No, you have to succeed, otherwise you're not eligible for so and so or anything. And people who have been part of those things are really appreciated, got growth in their roles, and that's what we have to try to give the message. This will really help.
Yeah. Thank you. Right. Fail fast to learn fast, right? I think that's the kind of culture we need to build, where while we motivate people to succeed, we encourage them to fail and learn as well if it happens. So on that note, I'd like to thank all my panelists here. It was a wonderful conversation. I think this is a topic we could really go on about. I think resilience, agility, adaptability are skills that are so relevant today, and everybody wants to know how do you build that. So I think it's about creating that culture. It's about building that resilience in people, where they know that even if things are going haywire, the organization is there to support them, and they can upskill themselves. If the business is moving, they should be moving at an equally fast speed to catch up. So I think that's where we need to be, that culture, that leadership, encouragement, motivation coming from every angle, where they say that, as you very rightly said, if you take care of your employees, they take care of your customer and your business at the same time. So that's the learning we take away. So once again, thank you so much, Vinay, Atul, Shruti, and Dimple. It was a pleasure hosting you all. Thank you. Let's have a huge round of applause for them. Thank you.